Alrighty, well, hello everyone, and welcome back. Welcome everybody in our side chat. And so far, right now, we just got Peter and Science Nerd. Welcome. Maybe we'll get some more people in there. All right, well, we are continuing with our debunking of Frank Turek and also Greg Kokel for a minute there. Joining me today is my host and co-host, Peter. Gonna go for it. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for hosting as always. I appreciate you immensely.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
And we also have Neslig here today. He is one of the editors on my scripts. He also has his own channel. Welcome, Neslig. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me. Also, you mentioned that I have a channel, but I don't do much on my channel. So always watch Jackson Reed's channel if you want to see my work. So yeah.
Awesome sauce. We also got Icarus and Eric. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome.
The Dutch are slowly overtaking Jackson's channel. We outnumber you 2.
Tends to happen.
Yeah, we outnumber you 2 to 1.
Well, is what it is, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you guys take over the world. This was your master plan.
One channel at the time.
To be frank, I don't want to be Turek. That's fair.
That's...
Yeah, so we started watching this video. I don't even remember what the video is called. It's in the description. But it's a show that Frank Turek did in 2010. Was it 2010? I think he's what he said.
Jackson, here's the thing. Years do not count when considering young Earth creationists, because as we have learned in our previous series, nothing changes. No new. Well, we had one new argument in an entire book. One thing that
infinite neuron.
Yes. So that would be a devolution because it's a loss of information, right? Because they're not using that anymore. That's a loss of information on the young Earth creationist side.
I guess. I suppose. So, yeah, that was that book. We read a book. We did a whole series on it. Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation, which was published in 1967. And yes, most of the arguments in there are still being thrown around today by creationists without a care in the world. They have no self-reflection. So now we're doing this Frank Turek show, and one of the highlights from last time was Frank Turek said evolutionists pretty much never talk about plants, which is
incorrect.
That's a take. That is certainly a take. I don't even know how to respond to that really, other than to say, like, do you read anything ever? I don't know.
It's actually more true of the creationists. Like the only time the creationists talk about plants is in reference to Darwin's comment on his abominable mystery. That's the only time we don't talk about plants.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they never talk about plants. There is an extremely rich literature on plants among evolutionary biologists. And I have TA'd a botany class, or the botany lab, and so I'm very much aware that there are papers on the evolution of plants. So it's just ridiculous. All right,
and you can't lure in a kid with a fern, because the kid will just say, "Go out in the woods. There is a fern in the woods." Yeah, but that's not prehistoric. But it's a fern. It's still a fern.
Yeah, it's still just a fern.
It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Okay.
All right.
Shall we start where we left off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's jump right into it.
Let's do it.
What you get is a restructuring of things, or rather an expression of things that are already there and may already be manifest in the populations, but in such a small amount, you don't notice it. So when you have the famous case of the peppered moth in England, You have the
Oh,
melanic
no.
variety, the darker variety, and the white. Those varieties always existed in the population.
Oh, no.
It's just that the force of the environment
Yes.
through natural selection changed
on.
the
I'll just let him
relative
go to the end.
numbers of the population. It didn't create one thing into another thing.
No.
So strictly
All right, let's-
speaking, there is no evolution even of a micronature going on there.
No.
There is natural
my
selection
gosh.
that's changing the relative densities of population. And so it gives the impression that there is an evolution to one variety and then an evolution back to the other variety when the conditions changed there in England after the Industrial Revolution. This is true with the Finch's beak as well. The famous
No, that's so not true.
We have to
Let's
address
Okay,
that.
let's talk about that. Yeah. Okay. So
He was doing
the first
so
thing, the
well. He was doing so well in explaining it.
Well, the funny thing was, well, he's just backwards. Like he's close. He's close, but off. Like, so the funny thing is, Turek was saying last time, like, oh yeah, we all accept microevolution, but we don't accept macroevolution. That old stupid chestnut. We destroyed that argument. Both in the last video and then also in our series on the book. So yeah, no, just stupid. Oh, also Frank is dishonest. Thanks. What currency is that?
I think it's Japanese currency, I think, right?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I love that it's 666 from Lloydie. Thank you.
I think it's yen, if I'm not mistaken. Yen
that
is
may be the
Japanese
yen.
currency. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a stupid American.
Yeah.
You'll have to forgive me.
That would be yen. We are working on a new tool to put these up that will automatically tell you what kind of currency it is, but that's still in the works because you're not the only one struggling. It's not an American thing.
It is a yen
thing. I mean, Europeans don't know all the currencies either. So
okay, fair enough. I mean, you know that old joke, Peter. What do you call someone who speaks only one language?
an American.
American.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, so it is a little bit more sophisticated because that is a meme that I made for someone who followed me, I think, 4, 5, maybe even 6 years ago. It's a guy from Louisiana, and he does on Twitter he attacks young Earth creationists or goes after young Earth creationists, but he does comedy in his spare time. And what he said is, what do you call someone who can speak 2 languages? And that was bilingual. And how do you...
Bilingual. Yeah.
Yes. And how do you call someone who speaks only one language an American? And yet I made 2 memes for him. I forgot what the other one was, but yeah, that's where
that's pretty funny. I like that.
Yeah.
I also, Icarus points out Americans speak 0.7 languages on average.
That is true as well.
Which, that's also true. Yes, very true. Anyway, back to this. So Turek was actually giving sort of the standard line of, yeah, microevolution's fine. We just don't believe in macroevolution. But then Greg Kokel here pipes up and says, no, actually, I don't accept microevolution either, which is a take.
Well,
that's a take right there.
Well, to be fair, he says that the pepper moth example specifically is not even microevolution, but it is also false.
Right.
Yeah,
it
is all false. Yeah.
So the
maybe he accepts microevolution in other examples, but he's wrong in this example. It is microevolution. Yeah.
Right. So the peppered moth example, it is microevolution because it's genetic change below the level of species. So it's populational genetic change. So what happened with the peppered moth was the white morph is the original, the white morph with the little black speckles.
Yeah.
But the new morph, the black Biston betullaria, is the result of a transposon, which is a jumping gene that landed in I think was it a promoter region? Something like that. It landed in a regulatory region, which caused an overexpression of the pigment, right?
Yeah, I don't recall the details, but I think it's something like that. It was at least a transposon involved, yes.
Yeah, it was a transpose. I believe it jumped in a regulatory region, which caused the overexpression of this pigment, and that's why they're black. So it's something along those lines. The point is, no, it was not always there, because the researchers actually managed to track back the exact variation, that transposon, to around the year 1820. So, no. Wrong on all counts. It was the black peppered moths of that variety were not always there. There was a definite start point when they arose. Now, he is right by saying the frequency of the black to white morphs changed. That did change as a result of natural selection during the Industrial Revolution. The soot covered the trees and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then the black morphs who existed at this, small random frequency, they finally had an advantage over the white morphs, which predominated. And what's funny,
the reason why the pepper moth became like a prominent example, it's not because like, oh, a new moth appeared. No, it was more like the change in the frequency of this phenotype.
Yes.
That was a good example of natural selection in action, basically. Yeah, that was the only.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was the only reason. Yeah,
it was natural selection on a human timescale, and lots of researchers have done this. Oop, I hear echoing. Researchers have done this experiment since then. Michael Majerus was the really big one. He's a population geneticist, or was a population geneticist. He's passed now. But he did a really big experiment replicating the results of the original Kettlewell experiment, and showing that, yes, it was bird predation predominantly that was driving the selection for the black morphs over the white ones. And so Nestle's absolutely right. What's cool about this experiment is that it was natural selection acting on human timescales, because Darwin tended to think that natural selection was operating like all the time, but very, very, very small levels, like so small you wouldn't be able to see it during your lifetime. But over many generations, you could detect whatever change.
If I'm not mistaken, the pepper moth example was discovered like in the time when it was the Darwin's eclipse, right? What was called the period of
the early 1900s. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah. So the funny thing is, actually, he like completely overshot Turek on this, which I thought was funny. Although I'm also surprised that that Kokel didn't go with the stupid Jonathan Wells argument that, oh, they taped the moths to the trees, or glued them. Sorry, they didn't tape them. They glued the moths to the trees to make it look like this is what was actually happening, which is just inane, just so stupid. It's so sad, because remember in the very last, or in the previous episode, they talked about how much respect they have for Jonathan Wells. The dude just straight up lied about the peppered moth experiment and wrote about it in Icons of Evolution, and he's been called out so many times for it. And the fact that anyone respects him, because this is 10 years after his book came out, is just sad. He does not deserve respect. So,
Jackson,
the other thing he said,
correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't that particular tale come from one specific article in which they explained that they had to glue two moths to the tree in order to get a picture, because they would just fly off if people get close? So that's how they took a picture for their magazine. It's not that had anything to do with the point they were trying to make. Sometimes you can't control animals. Right. You can't control animals. So if you want to take a picture, you have to do things in order to get your picture. That was one of them.
Yeah, you're right. Because also with like the original like pictures or whatever, the camera, because they took them like a long time ago, the original pictures, and it was obviously not the iPhones that we have today, so it took a little bit for the picture to snap and everything. And so Wells is an idiot. They're all idiots over there at the Discovery Institute. I don't even care. So the other thing was, I hear echo again.
Yeah, I have no clue how that happens. It's not on my end, though. There's no echo here.
And it's me.
I don't know.
Let me check.
I also hear an echo.
Yeah, that's probably the way how I need to fix things in order to give you guys audio of the video. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, I don't hear it now. Oh, now I hear it again. Well, last time I refreshed, it kind of went away.
No, it's probably not going to help because it's not on your end. Well, now we have to juggle until Jackson is back.
I don't hear it anymore.
And there he is.
All right. So the other thing that Kokol mentioned was the Finch beaks. He said, "Oh, the Finch, the Finches were already there." No. What he's probably referring to is again another Wells argument where with the cyclical change of the Finch beak sizes, because there was a book published in I think it was 94. It was The Beak of the Finch by Jonathan Weiner, and so one of the things that Weiner found, one of the things that he wrote about, one of the really big discoveries that Peter and Rosemary Grant made in the Galapagos, was that there would be these cyclic changes in the finch beak sizes. So when the finches when the islands were, had like lots of rain and food was plentiful, then you could have a lot of variation in finch beak size. And however, when there was no rain, when there was a distinct lack of rain, and it was very barren, the variation decreased to very, very slim parameters. And so, whereas like the finches could possibly even hybridize during normal times where food's plentiful, suddenly when times are tough, they can't hybridize because the variation decreases to a very thin range for each of the species. For whatever they're good at, they have to be good enough to open the seeds and fruits and nuts and all this sort of stuff in a very short amount of time to get their food. Because if they can't, then they expend too much energy and they die in the heat. And so this was again natural selection in action in a human lifetime. And Wells wrote about how it doesn't really matter because they're still just finches. It's just the beak size that's changing, over and over. But the thing about the finches, the reason that Darwin appreciated them so much was each of the islands has a different set of finches, right? So if you go to Daphne Major and then you go to Albemarle or whatever, I don't remember all the island names. The finches found on each island are different, and they have adapted in different ways to the local flora. So there are cactus finches, and there are finches that only eat seeds from certain trees, and whatever else. There are actually finches that drink blood from the Nazca and blue-footed boobies, but anyway. So
I've recently seen a TikTok video by Hank Green from SciShow. One of his spooky science episodes was highlighting how this one finch on this one island sometimes sucks the blood of this bird.
Yeah.
I never heard of that. It's really creepy.
Yeah, Geospiza septentrionalis, the vampire ground finch. It's whack. Whack little bird. But yeah, that's the thing that Darwin was impressed with the finches. It wasn't just that they had this cyclical change, which he wasn't even aware of. He didn't know that happened. It was the fact that there is a biogeographic element to the finch distribution, or there is a geographic element to the finch distribution. So anyway, I've talked long enough about that. Are we ready to move on to the next part?
Mm-hmm.
Unless we have anything to add.
No, I'm good.
All right, well, let's go.
Darwin's finches that that have the larger beak and the smaller beak. Again, you have no novel information that's being caused by some Darwinian mechanism.
Simply not true.
What you have is a change in population size through natural selection, certainly, but only a change in population size, not actual evolution, not introduction of novel features, even on a micro level. So the idea.
Wait, a change in population size? Where did you get that from?
That's also not true. Yeah, I don't even know what that... There are 13 species of finch on the Galapagos Islands, so they had to come from somewhere. You know, where'd they come from? Did God just drop them all there? Did they come from a common ancestor, which we now know they did?
No,
Like,
Jackson.
what does
I
he
have
expect?
I have to correct you. They flew there from Noah's Ark.
Of course,
You,
right?
you left that
My
out.
bad.
Yeah, you left that out.
We got Neil the 604 atheist.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, Neil.
Welcome. Yeah, this is just... I don't know even what he's... I think he doesn't know enough about what he's talking about to like formulate a coherent argument.
He defines evolution as a gain of information.
Right.
And who the hell knows what the information is and how it's measured and how it's defined. But yeah, of course, that's not how most biologists define evolution. Like as you mentioned, the change in allele frequencies is the basic definition of evolution, and that's even if he's right that it's all allele frequency changes, no new genes or something, it would still be evolution. But I digress. So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's
microevolution.
Natural selection is a mechanism of evolution because it changes allele frequencies. That's why it's a mechanism. You know. Anyway, all right, continue.
We can kind of give the nod to, but even then we're giving more credit than is due given the evidence.
Exactly. Well said. That's often overlooked. What we are saying
Not
is
exactly,
there is a certain sense of microevolution.
I have to stop it here. One thing I have to point out. You can see on Frank's face how annoyed he gets when Coco interrupts him. He
just kind of went, yep, that's true, and then moved on.
Yeah. Shut up. This is my show. Why are you interfering? I just wanted to point that out.
It's like a teacher having a shell.
What he did.
Yeah.
It's like a teacher having a Sheldon in his class. Sheldon from like.
I like to compare it, although it's not entirely fair. Professor Snape having Hermione Granger in the class, except this Hermione Granger doesn't know anything, but just thinks he does.
It's Leviosa.
Yes. It's just funny to see Frank's reaction every single time. Okay. Starting the video.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know why I invited you, Greg.
Yeah. What are you doing here?
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Continue?
Yep.
Okay.
Microevolution, as Greg just pointed out, it's really not change. It's a change in proportion of the given population. In fact, Darwin's finches,
it's not.
The proportion of long beak to short beak finches changed with the weather changes. You know,
no.
Drought,
what?
I think
no, it didn't. They're separate species, you dunce.
What? What would the weather have to do?
Are just one species?
And is he looking at our side chat, because we're talking about the weather in Canada at the moment? So is he? It's that what it is.
Probably.
What does the weather have to do with any of this? And how would the weather be different on the Galapagos Islands? It would probably be pretty similar.
Well, so Peter, what he's trying to say and failing very bad at is that there are periods on the Galapagos where you have more rain. You have like rainy season, but it lasts like a year. It lasts a lot longer. And then you have really dry periods where you get very little rain.
I think it's connected to the El Nino and La Nina periods, I think, perhaps.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And so you'll get these periods of abundant rainfall when you have lots of, you'll have lots of plant growth and stuff. Then you'll have very little rainfall where you'll just get like little plant growth. And so what he's failing explaining is not that the finch population is one homogeneous population that goes from having large to small beaks. There are 13 separate species, some of whom have large beaks and some of whom have small beaks. It's just like,
yeah, but so
why are
even
you so bad at this?
even considering the weather would be pretty much the same on all of the islands. It wouldn't be that vastly different from each other because they're in a close
sure.
region.
Sure.
It's just that
Yes.
the different islands have different plant and animal life, which is why the finches evolved differently because they have to rely on different foods.
Yes.
So I don't
Right.
I fail to see what the weather has anything to do with this. It's an environment thing.
Well, I think
Well, in the
Go ahead.
weather example, like there was one specific population of finches, like as Jackson mentioned, during the year or the years when little rainfall is present, then you have like very the only food source available is very hard seeds, if I'm not mistaken, and then the finches adapt to eat those hard seeds. But when the rain returns, and then you have like much more different foods available, including I think pollen maybe, or maybe something else. And for those you need very fine and long, thin beaks to be able to get. And that's when finches evolve the long, slender beaks again, basically. But of course, as Jackson also mentioned, you also have different species of finches that adapted to different niches. They are still around. So yeah, I think it's an equivocation between those two. Like you still have the different species, but you also have the year to year or decade to decade changes that will periodically occur. So yeah.
Yeah, he's just so dumb. How is this man this clueless about the things he's discussing? Oh wait, he's a creationist. That's how. Okay.
And
Alrighty.
I hate to
Yes,
say it,
go.
but I don't think that they are that clueless. I think that a lot of these apologists are lying on purpose while knowing better, just in order to convince the flock that God exists. I mean, it wouldn't be a first.
That's certainly possible. Yeah. That's true.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Deeper, and when you had wet season, they had shorter beaks because they didn't need to go as deep in order to. But what changed was just the proportion of the long
Go
beaks
as
to short
deep
beak
in
finches.
what?
What?
You didn't get anything other than finches. And by the way, as Philip Johnson points out, what's often overlooked is,
Oh God.
where did the finches come from to begin with? Right? He says natural selection can help explain the survival of the species, but not the arrival. Where did they come from to begin with? All right. How about
South
molecular
America.
machines?
Peter,
Molecular machines.
Can you pause it?
Yep.
Peter?
Yeah.
It was jumpy. It was real jumpy for me. I don't know if that was my screen or my end.
It wasn't jumpy for me.
Is it just me? Was it fine for you guys?
I mean, Can you maybe turn off your camera? Maybe
It wasn't jumpy for you?
Your internet is a little bit spotty.
well-
your video quality
Here, look, I'll turn off my cam.
went down a bit too.
I'll turn off my cam. We'll just do that. That's fine. I'll just turn it off. Okay, so he mentioned that natural selection can explain the survival of the species, but it can't explain the arrival of the species. Again, no, that's wrong, sir. Speciation is a field. It's an entire field. I literally have the textbook on speciation by Coyne and Orr from 2004, and there are they discuss speciation via natural selection. So let's use it to explain where the finches came from. Sorry, the Galapagos finches. So the Galapagos finches, as we explained when we talked, I think when we read the book, or no, maybe it was when Dapper and I did the PowerPoint. Anyway, the Galapagos finches aren't actually finches. They're tanagers. So they're members of the family Thropidae. Now, all the finches, all the tanagers on the Galapagos are members of one subfamily, which is called Geospizinae. And the closest relatives of Geospizinae are, drumroll, in Ecuador. So it's very easy to see. So all of the finches, all of the Galapagos finches are more closely related to each other than they are to any of the tanagers on the mainland. However, they are also together more closely related to some of the tanagers on the mainland than those tanagers are to other tanagers. So we know Geospizinae nests within the family Theropidae, and we know how the tanagers got to the Galapagos. They flew. And we can understand how they have evolved specific beak sizes for specific niches. None of this is complicated. It's not hard.
I
Does it
think
seem hard to you guys? I don't know.
no, but I think that what he means when he's saying this is the thought that all of these finches were created one by one by a god, and that's where they came from. If you don't accept
Maybe.
evolution, then you won't accept that the finches from the Galapagos Islands evolved from the finches in Ecuador, because that couldn't be a thing, because those are different. And God created every single thing except for the flood, where he drowned everything and only kept kinds, and then the kinds evolved, but they didn't evolve. This is the problem that they face every single time. If you keep their feet at the fire, they have to admit that they're just lying about things, flat out lying. Because if evolution isn't true, then how many animals did Noah have on his ark? And according to Sal Cordova, obviously, he only had cells, which I still think is funny.
Well, the thing is, there's a bind. Creationists are in a bind at Noah's Ark. Either they can say there were more species, which means there's less after, there's less evolution after the animals get off the ark, or you have fewer species on the ark, which makes booking it easier, but you have more evolution after the ark.
Yeah.
And so they're in this bind that they created, mind you. And so, there's an easy way to get out of this bind. Just acknowledge there was no global flood. There was no Noah's Ark. It didn't happen. It's all mythological nonsense. So,
yeah,
there's that. It's a story meant to tell a tale, a moral tale or something. It's not history.
Someone should have told them, there's a piece of wisdom. If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Right.
Because that's basically what they're doing. They come up with one solution and then create a massive problem in order to fix their solution. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how, especially with their physics stuff and their chemistry stuff, they keep compounding problems. They're like, oh, we have this, this one big issue over here. Okay, well, we'll invent this other problem to solve it. Well, now we have another problem. Well, we'll invent another problem to solve that, and they just keep adding problems. Why do all the radioactive, dating methods show that the Earth is, millions or billions of years old? Well, they were sped up in the past. That's why. That fixes that. Okay, well, that creates the heat problem now, and we irradiate the entire visible universe. Well, God had to intervene with a miracle. It's like, okay.
He can do everything, Jackson. You keep forgetting that.
Yes, except
he can do
just
everything.
Peter, I guess.
The only thing God cannot do is provide us with apologists who actually have solutions. That's the only thing God couldn't do.
I guess that's true.
Oh.
You're right. All right. Let's move on.
Okay.
Take a look at this. As you've probably seen this quote, according to Charles Darwin, Darwinism's dead. If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight changes, my theory would absolutely break down. And of course, sort of the mascot of the intelligent design movement is the bacterial flagellum.
Well,
Take a look at the bacterial flagellum. It's the width of an E. coli bacterium cell, which is about 1/1.
Should we now quote Sasha Gabor's 10th husband? We know what to do, but we don't know how to make it interesting. Because it's the flagellum again.
Yeah.
That was a quote that was brought up in the Kitzmiller versus Dover case when they again spent an entire day talking about bacterial flagellum.
But also that I, if I'm not mistaken, that quote, like when Darwin says, like my theory would absolutely break down, but right in the next sentence that Turek doesn't show, Darwin says, but I cannot find such case.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
I guess we'll talk about the flagellum for a moment. It's been a long while since I have done any stuff related to the flagellum. We did a video on it way back. But I don't remember a whole lot about it. Professor Dave Explains actually did a relatively recent video where he talked about it. Actually, Dan Stern Cardinal was the one who helped him with that. And Erica and I also helped him with a video, which should be coming out next week, I think. So very excited for that. So the flagellum was made famous among creationists and intelligent design proponents back in, was it 97? When did was it 97? I think when Darwin's Black Box came out, which was Michael Behe's first book.
I don't know when that book came out.
I know it was late 90s. I think it was 97. I could be wrong, but it's all right. So Darwin's Black Box is published by Michael Behe in late 1990s, and he brings out the bacterial flagellum, and he says, this is irreducibly complex. So the interesting thing about this argument is that it's basically unfalsifiable. Irreducible complexity is
depends
like
on how you define it. Yeah, it depends on how you define. Like there are two definitions. So one is unfalsifiable. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the definitions of irreducible complexity is unfalsifiable, and actually Professor Dave talks about this. So it's also like whack-a-mole, because when creationists give you something that's irreducibly complex, and then you provide a list of ways that this thing can evolve, and we know it has evolved and all that jazz, they say, okay, well, here's this other thing. Mm-hmm. There's no way to defeat irreducible complexity, because even if you learn everything about one organelle or cell structure or whatever, they'll just find something else that you don't know about, and you'll go round and round and round and round. And so there are there's no way to completely debunk this argument unless you know everything about like everything in biology, which is just not going to happen. One of the fun things is that Michael Behe said, I want to see researchers come up with an experiment where they knock out the flagellum and then bacteria like re-evolve it, and that had already been done before he even made that comment. So
like I think it was like one experiment where they removed the regulatory element that controls the expression of the flagellum in the bacteria. So that knocked out the flagellum in the bacteria, but then they grew the bacteria in a medium where like a motility was beneficial, and after several generations they grew back the flagella again by co-opting a different regulatory element in place of the old one. So they gained the information back, basically, to put it in terms that the creationists will understand.
Yeah, exactly. And also the funny thing is, all of the proteins involved in the flagellum exist elsewhere in the cell. Like the genes that determine the structure of the flagellum are duplicated genes. It's a whole bunch of gene duplications, but using obviously a gene that already existed and using proteins that already existed. right? So the system, all these guys existed. They were just co-opted for a new function over their old ones. So, and another cool fact about these proteins is all of them like undergo these structural changes like normally, like they form rings and stuff normally, just as a function of how the protein itself is made. So, anyway, do you guys want to add anything else on that?
There is one thing, like in the Dover trial, you have like I think maybe Kenneth Miller or maybe someone else brought up the example of the type 3 secretory system, which is basically a reduced version of the bacterial flagellum, because it lacks some of the components and it's still functional. Of course, the IB fellows, they often respond by saying that the type 3 secretory system is a later, not an ancestral version, but a later derived version in the flagellum, and they may be correct about that. It may be a later addition instead of the ancestor. But even if that's right, even if it's correct, it would still show that the flagellum is reducible, right? So
right.
You can still have a reduced version and still be able to function. What's funny is there is even a more reducible version of the bacterial flagellum than the type 3 secretory system. It's called the ATP synthase, because that's basically the core of the bacterial flagellum. And what's funny is that that's basically the new irreducible complexity poster child of IT nowadays. Nowadays, that's their go-to
That's so
example.
dumb, because we know where it came from. The base is like a helicase. That's so dumb. Oh, well, it is creationism. You know, I am surprised though that like once Behe and the others got their butts absolutely handed to them in the Dover trial, they didn't drop this one. It stuck with them. So I don't know. I think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's also I remember Ken Miller brought a lot of books and scientific papers to the trial and asked Behe whether or not he had read them, because they were all about the evolution of the bacterial flagellum. And he just admitted that he hadn't read any of them.
Well, specifically, that was on the vertebrate immune system, and there was like one lawyer who had like this stack of peer-reviewed papers and textbook chapters, like just stacking them on top of one another in front of Behe, and he was like, "Have you read any of them?" And then Behe says no, and then but here are chapters.
Oh, it's not enough.
On the it's not enough. So he says, it's like just dismisses them outright. Yeah.
Which that's got to be pretty embarrassing, you know. I know these guys. I know that creationists in general are fairly lacking on shame, but that's got to look, pretty embarrassing. So
it shows determination to say, when people are stacking books and papers in front of you, and you admit that you haven't read them, and still make the claim that it's not enough. How would you know?
Yeah. Oh. Of course, in any other context, it may be a cheap shot. Like if you come across anybody on the street and do something like that, it would be a cheap shot. But we are talking about PhD. Michael P. is a PhD who claimed that there is no answer to his question, and yet we have a lawyer showing him a stack of papers and textbooks. It's really bizarre.
Right. I mean, his whole thing is that he's done the research on this and concluded that there's not evidence. And to be shown this and then say, I'm not aware of that, or I wasn't aware of that. It's like, okay, well, so you didn't do the reading, apparently.
Well, in all fairness, Jackson, these people have one book, the Bible. 9 out of 10 haven't read the entire Bible yet. So you can confront them with certain passages in the Bible that they're blissfully unaware of, because, they don't read. They go to church for the book report. That's it.
I guess.
Mhm.
All right, let's move on.
Okay.
Thousandth the width of a human hair, so you could line up 12,500 in an inch of these things.
Big number.
It has 240
Mhm.
distinct proteins. It has a microscopic outboard motor on its tail that
Okay,
runs at
hold
an
up.
incredible
I have while that bacterial flagellum keeps flapping in this particular part of the video, I have to say this because there's a saying in Dutch which translate that shared hurt is half the hurt. And gedeelde smart is halve smart. Neslik will know what it means, and if my translation is incorrect, he can correct me. Recently, I produced for Arm Raw. Recently, we had a guy in the side chat. Most of you will know him as the incredible Otangelo Grasso. And he was trying to convert people by saying that we all need to find God in order to get to heaven. Now, there's one person in the side chat on Arnra shows who's almost always there. She's a good friend of mine, and she has an incredible sense of humor. And she pointed out that if there is a heaven, according to her, everyone would be naked, and the men would all be performing the helicopter. And now I have that image of Otangelo flailing his thing around, and I need to ask.
I don't think that was an image I needed.
No, but this is where the Dutch saying comes in. Shared hurt is half the hurt. So I need to share it with as much people as I possibly can until I get the opportunity to ask Otangelo if he's been practicing. Sorry. Had to do this. Had to do this.
Oh my gosh.
Shall we continue? And then at the end we will ask the people on the panel whether or not they could have kept their eyes off the flagellum on screen. Okay.
100,000 revolutions per minute. This is a little motor here.
Oh my goodness.
And it only takes a quarter turn to stop, shift directions, and start spinning 100,000 RPMs in the opposite direction. I don't even know if we have a motor that can do that ourselves. And it's irreducibly complex. It must have been created all at once because you can't have function of a motor as it's being put together. The whole motor needs to be there at the same time in order for you to have function.
I have an idea. Maybe it wasn't a motor
steps,
before it became a motor.
I have to interject again because in my entire career, one of the things that I did is I repaired electric motors. All kinds of different electric motors. And guess what? They are not irreducibly complex. And if you line up certain things in order to make a motor work in a specific way, you could make a motor that does exactly the same thing as the bacterial flagellum on a larger scale. It doesn't mean that a single motor to just drive an axle doesn't exist. It's not irreducibly complex, not even if you want to compare to an actual motor.
So the big thing that Frank is hitting on and missing is what's called exaptation or co-option. He says, "Oh, it couldn't be a motor without all these parts." Well, for one thing, I do not believe it's true that all flagella have however many 400 or so proteins. I don't think that's true. But also, a lot of times features do not have the same role throughout all of their evolutionary history. They have a role as one thing, and then as they are modified, they acquire a new role.
Yeah.
So like, feathers, for instance, feathers appear in dinosaurs that could not have possibly used them to fly. Right? They would probably been used for insulation, for signaling, but very unlikely they were used as
And probably,
flight feathers.
Yeah, and probably to keep a larger nest warm.
Yeah.
Which is
right.
what
and
birds still do
right.
with their wings.
Right, exactly. They were using them for incubating and thermoregulation and signaling, all this fun stuff. But they were not used for flight because the dinosaurs were way too big. They were too big, and they didn't have the breastbone to be able to do powered flight and all that sort of stuff. So they were not using them for flying. But as bird evolution, as theropod evolution progressed towards birds, and they eventually miniaturized, they became small enough, and their breastbone eventually evolved to be large enough where they could achieve powered flight, not just gliding. And so these feathers could be used for actual flight, for powered flight, not just for these other functions. But they didn't evolve for that purpose originally. And so the flagellum, whatever it's doing before it became a motor, right, it was doing something else. These proteins existed before the flagellum existed.
Mm-hmm.
So they were doing other jobs and then got co-opted for this new function. Right. Same with like walking limbs, right? So the ancestors of seals look like weasels, but their limbs were modified slowly for swimming. But they didn't originally evolve for that purpose. So that's exaptation.
Same thing.
Anything else you guys want to add on this part?
Yeah, same thing. I think the penguin is a good example. Penguin has wings,
yes,
but the wings now function as flippers. So,
right,
and they can't fly. So, can a half a wing have a purpose? Yes, it can be a flipper for one.
Yeah, I think ostriches use theirs for turning.
And it's
wings to turn.
It's also pretty handy if you're Catholic, because on a Friday you can't have meat, but you can have fish. And so if you then decide that a penguin is a fish because it swims and it doesn't fly, you can have penguin meat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I guess that's true.
No, it is true. There are several birds that are that the Catholics have designed to be fish because they swim in the water, and those are the animals they can eat.
Well, birds technically are fish.
I mean, I guess that's true.
Yeah. Well,
pigs are fish too.
Yeah, I mean that would add in pigs and cows, so we can have a burger on Friday. So yeah, and
there
that's probably
it's good, guys. God said so.
I just discovered something because the Pope has declared that we should accept evolution. That is probably the reason. Because now everything is a fish and you can eat whatever you want on a Friday, because it's only the Catholics that only eat fish on a Friday.
Right. Yeah.
See? There's a reason for everything. If it works for you, then you can accept it. See? We uncovered a mystery. Continue.
Alrighty, moving on. Yep, continuing.
You drive your car when it's halfway built, right? And Ken Miller and other so-called critics of this will try and say they have a precursor to this, but they really don't.
They're definitely critics of it.
They don't have a functional precursor to this. In fact, when you look at this, if this isn't something engineered, I don't know what is. You've got a propeller,
then you don't know what
you've got bushings with L rings, P rings, you got membranes, hooks, universal joints, you've got a rotor,
membranes
an
existed
and an M-ring,
before.
you've got studs, a stator, you got all this stuff, which is really
an
engineered creation. It's not something that could come into existence. And
can you define irreducible complexity for us so we?
Oh yeah, okay.
We see why
this is going to be good.
So critical to Darwinian enterprise.
An irreducibly complex system or creation, whatever it is, whatever you're talking about, has to have all the parts in working order at the right place at the right time in order to have function. The illustration that Michael Behe gives is
that's not what the definition is.
You've got to have all five.
That is
parts
not the
of
definition of irreducibly complex.
In order to catch mice. Yeah, you could have a precursor to a mousetrap, but it wouldn't catch mice if you took some of the parts away.
Here,
you need to have all the parts there in working order to.
Okay, so first of all, that is not the definition of irreducibly complex. It is not simply that the thing that now exists has to have all of its parts to function correctly. That is not the definition. The definition is, to parallel Darwin, a structure could not have evolved step by step, right? For any purpose. It didn't have it would not have been able to have had a purpose before it had all of its parts together. It couldn't evolve step by step. It is not simply that now it has to have all its features to work, because that's true of most things, right? Even things they wouldn't consider irreducibly complex.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny that Frank can't even define it correctly. When he basically had, he could have just kind of quoted Darwin. Darwin wasn't far off with that definition or with that statement. So whatever. Also, the mousetrap thing is something that makes Michael Behe very angry, and he still also doesn't understand that one either. Because I watched a video of Michael Behe not too long ago where he says that, the mousetrap can't function as a mousetrap without all of its parts. Well, okay. Who said it was always functioning as a mousetrap?
Mm-hmm.
If it evolved, why are you assuming it always had the function of the mouse of the?
Well, the reason for that, Jackson, is that Ken Miller actually used a mousetrap with some of the parts removed as a tie clip during the Kitzmiller versus Dover case.
Right.
So,
hold on, I'm gonna refresh again.
And it's weird. I go again. Why did it echo? Is this also echoing for the audience?
It's not echoing for the audience, because if it were echoing for the audience, then I would hear it on my end, and I don't hear it. So, it is just for you, not for the audience. For the audience, the sound is still okay.
I don't know.
It's gone now for me.
There you go.
Yeah. So sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But yeah.
Yeah. So it's Exaptation. Behe is paid too much money to understand Exaptation. Frank Turek just simply doesn't understand Exaptation. So,
which by the way, this whole particular thing is, when people watch the intro, you can go look for it, because I chose a specific part of one of Michael Behe's videos where he's trying to tell a car mechanic what to do, and the mechanic just sends him off and say, "You don't know shit about this. Go play somewhere else." That is the clip that is in this intro. You can see him. They stand under a car.
That's pretty funny.
And that is why I chose that particular one, because this is what creationists tend to do. They tend to make comments on things they don't understand and therefore get it wrong, annoying the people who do know what they're doing. So I thought that was pretty good to have in the intro.
Absolutely, yeah. I really do like the intro, and I thank you again for that, Peter.
You're welcome.
Very well done.
You're welcome. Next time I shouldn't design an intro in 4K, because it took me 2 weeks, because every single time I had to render a trial, it took me almost an entire day to render a video that only lasts for 26 seconds. That was a bit much.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. And if you're designing and you have to see what you're doing in real time, which I can't do in After Effects, I do have to render it out. So that was a tiring thing to do. And I took note. Never do that again. Just set everything up in 1080p and save lots and lots of time until you get a better computer.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep moving.
Continuing.
Together at the same time in order to have function. Do you have a different definition?
No, it's just because the Darwinian model requires.
You want to talk again, Greg?
That each piece be added little by little, and at each stage you have increased functionality.
Yes.
With irreducible complexity, you have functionality at no stage of the building of the thing until
Look how annoyed he is.
Built. So when you have a bona fide irreducibly complex feature in the biological realm, there is no Darwinian way to explain how the pieces get assembled to the functional state. And what guys like Miller want to say is that there must be some functionality to the preliminary states that then leads you to this final sophisticated state we see here. But of course, there must be only if you're presuming the materialistic explanations. If you're going with the evidence as we're facing it, we are free then to just deposit the most obvious explanation, this is design. They are not free to do that because they are restricted by their philosophical presuppositions, so they have to demand that there must be
We're restricted by the evidence.
some functionality to these prior stages, and this is the demand that they force upon the argument to disqualify the conclusions of irreducible.
So science.
Now, a conclusion of an
They do
irreducibly
science.
complex system is what Michael Behe takes, because he wrote the book on this, and here's what he says. He says the result of these cumulative efforts to investigate the cell, to investigate life at the molecular level, is a loud, clear, piercing cry of design. The result is so unambiguous and so significant that it must be ranked as one of the greatest achievements in the history of science. The discovery rivals those of Newton and Einstein. Now,
funny how no one agrees with him on that.
Is he just seeing what he wants to see?
Yeah, he is.
I'll let you decide that. Science doesn't say anything, scientists do. I think he's drawing the proper conclusion based on the evidence, but that's for you to decide.
Like, it's really funny how he front loads this whole argument, like, oh, look at this amazing discovery. It's on the same caliber as Newton and Einstein, and it's so obvious. So why don't you agree with me? It's all It's basically It's just like a question begging much. That's all it is.
The funny thing is, the more that I learn about biology, the less I have any regard for like creationism or intelligent design in any form. Like, the more I understand biology, the more that I learn about it, the more data that we gather, the more ridiculous the design argument gets. And it doesn't help their case at all that all these guys are like fringe crackpots who only make arguments in blog posts. That really doesn't help. Because at least with creationists, they are they're more popular. Young Earth creationism is more popular than intelligent design. Intelligent design is like a little group of people. There's not a lot of them. They don't make that big of waves in anti-evolutionism generally. It's really just the creationists who are the guys making big waves. And they don't even try to publish in journals. They don't even try. They have their blogs. AIG.
Jackson, what about the answers in the research journal?
Right, their journal, which is peer reviewed by Andrew Snelling. That one. So
that one.
ICR, CMI, AIG, all these guys are just, they know they're not gonna get anywhere with the scientists. So they tell their folks, don't worry about those evil materialists. They're trying to hide the truth from you. We know the truth. We got you. So.
I also want to point out the concept of irony is completely lost on these people. Every single big apologist organization like Answers in Genesis or CMI, they all have a statement of faith. You can't be a janitor in any of those organizations if you do not accept their statement of faith, which is that any evidence that conflicts with the Bible has to be ignored. And now, what do we see on screen right behind Frank Turek? Are people just seeing what they want to see? Yes, but that is you, the creationist. That is literally what you do. You ignore everything else if it contradicts what you already believe, because you just want to see what you want to see, nothing else.
This is actually, I have to make one correction. It's not simply that they have to adhere to the Bible. It's specifically they have to adhere to their interpretation of the Bible. That's
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
All right.
There's a
you ready?
significant difference between the two. Yeah, I can go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Let's roll.
Continue.
Side.
Yep.
Question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I
Can I go back there?
Freaking Greg.
There is, it's not unusual to hear people say that Behe has been completely refuted on this point. And
Because
when
he
you
has.
look at the details, what you discover is that someone has taken an example of alleged irreducible complexity, and then they have contrived an explanation, and it may be a clever explanation that is worth looking into. I'm not dismissing it. But they've contrived an explanation how that particular piece of machinery can be explained by some kind of step-by-step process in which each step has functionality.
It's a possibility, but it's not evidence.
Well, it's a possibility, and
Yeah,
that's okay
yeah.
because scientists have
Right.
to do that. That's part of what they do. They tell stories and then
Wow.
try to
He's
find,
actually right.
Evidence that the story
Props
that
to
things
Greg.
played out the way they think they do. So I'm not.
I have to stop because this is one of the things that annoys me most.
Well,
Scientists-
actually, I have to give
scientists-
props to Greg on that.
Yeah, but scientists tell stories. That's their job. No, that is not their job.
Well, yeah.
That is your job. Stop
That's
projecting.
It's also the case that even if you have an explanation for how this could have evolved step by step, even if that hypothesis is not the correct hypothesis for how this has evolved, it still shows that it could have evolved this way. That it is a possible pathway,
Right.
and that already shows it's not irreducible, or at least evolvable. And the irreducible complexity argument does not hold water at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. The other thing about it is what he's sort of getting at is how researchers have to make hypotheses for how something happened, right? And you can find, like, for ATP synthase, you can find papers that go through the step by step evolution of ATP synthase. They're out there. But, is that necessarily the exact way it happened? Well, maybe not. Maybe that's not the way it happened. This is a way.
Maybe we need to
could
add more
have-
details or change some details, perhaps. Yeah.
Right. This
So
is
that's
a
possible,
way
yeah.
it could potentially have happened, but it is a viable option for how this could have happened. But the other thing is, these hypotheses are also predictions. If you look at a sequence, he's going to fossil record next. So if you look at, like, one of the most famous examples, Neil Shubin and colleagues, they looked at what we already had in terms of fossils, and they said, okay, we should have something. We should be able to find something that is intermediate in characteristics between, like, Panderichthes and Acanthostega. And they, knew where they should go look, and they found it. It's Tiktaalik, and it is intermediate in its characters between those taxa. And so these are hypotheses. They're not endpoints. We're not just drawing pictures and saying, aha, this is how it happened. These researchers are drawing inferences and making hypotheses about what could potentially have happened. And then the goal next is to go and find evidence that this is the way it happened, right? Or some other way. And that's also kind of lost on these guys because none of them are scientists. They're a bunch of apologists. So, anyway.
Who's correct? Because he sometimes gets it, apparently. Sometimes, like, who is he?
Who?
Craig. The one who is talking right now, like in the frame.
Greg Kokel?
Yeah.
He's just an apologist.
He sometimes gets it, so
yeah. I mean, that's true, but yeah, he's still, at the end of the day, he's just an apologist. That's all he is.
Right. All right. Moving
Same
on.
as Turek. Yep. Yeah, we can move on.
Yeah, he gets it right just before he completely loses the plot every single time. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, before the train jumps the tracks.
Yes. he goes on for quite a while getting most of it right and then completely derails. It's probably because he has to. Okay, continuing.
not faulting the process. I'm making a little different point. Let's even just say, for the sake of discussion, that they have done a convincing job of giving us a materialistic explanation to demonstrate that one alleged example of irreducible complexity is not, in fact, irreducibly complex. But then they take that to be a refutation of the entire point and every
Because it is a
example
refutation.
of irreducibly complex machines in the biological realm. I've seen this time and
don't
time
think
again.
that happens.
He's been completely disproved. How so? Well, because this flagellum thing, well, we found a way to explain that in Darwinian terms. So there he goes. As if the flagellum is the only example of an irreducibly complex thing.
No one does that,
We
though.
are going to play we are going to play whack-a-mole.
Yep, we're going to play whack-a-mole. Here it comes.
What? And this is now is refuting what they've been saying all along. They found an explanation, but it doesn't explain the other thing. This is what creationists do. If they figure out that you know something about a specific thing that they have a problem with, they're going to move the goalpost and they want to talk about something else. If you're talking about the bacterial flagellum, then they will come up, but you can't say how the universe got here.
Right.
What does that have to
Yeah.
do with this particular point? You're asking for an explanation. You're now admitting that there is a good explanation for it. And now your only criticism is that that doesn't explain everything? Are you nuts?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the things that is most annoying about apologists, that they can't stay on topic once they fear that they're going to be defeated in their argument. Then they immediately have to jump to something completely different. Hoping that you can't explain that. Okay. Sorry for my rant.
No, you were right. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Field know, the biological realm is absolutely littered with these kinds of things. In
No,
every
it's not.
single cell you see these kinds of things.
No, you don't.
And just in the replication process of the DNA and how the DNA helps
Now
make
he's
protein,
going full
assemble proteins.
Otangelo.
There's all kinds of little machines that are involved in that process. And by
I hate that they
explaining
keep
away
calling
one of
enzymes
the
machines.
in
They're
this
not
vast array of
machines.
them, you have not defeated the argument of irreducible complexity. You've just removed supposedly one example of irreducible complexity.
You know, William Dembski makes the point that the irreducible complexity argument on steroids
completely
is
skipped
the
him.
origin of life. Because for the origin
There was
of
no
life,
acknowledgement there
Yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah. Moving
you
on.
need DNA, you need RNA,
That's how you.
and you need proteins. And all four of those things need one another.
No, they
Have
don't.
to all be
RNA
there
does not
together
need
to have any
proteins.
of them in a living thing. DNA needs RNA, RNA needs DNA, a cell needs both of them, proteins need...
No,
they all
you
go
are
together.
flatly
It's
wrong,
a
sir.
classic chicken and egg problem.
No, it's not.
That's the irreducible
So
He's just so wrong.
he is.
So wrong.
We do have
RNA
cells
does
that
not
only
need
have
DNA.
RNA. We have cells that only have RNA.
Well,
They don't need.
viruses.
Yes.
have-
Viruses, yeah.
Viruses
They don't need
have just
DNA.
RNA genomes.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. That's bonkers. That's so wrong. Oh my gosh, he's so stupid. It's so infuriating. Like, also, you get very short, very small organic molecules that like just exist in nature, right? And jumping from those to more complex organic molecules is just a matter of like finding some surface that lowers the activation energy for these reactions to occur.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's no. Why is he so dumb?
Mm-hmm.
Why does
I
he
also
act
like how-
so authoritative? What?
I also like how echo again. I left my.
Hold on,
Like, I
give me one
also like
sec.
how. Sorry.
Jackson's refreshing.
Oh, alright.
Go ahead. Make.
But I like how the other person was going full Otangelo, like when he says like, even if you refute the bacterial flagellum, like there are so many different things in the cell. It's also there's pretty complex, like DNA
Mhm.
and replication and such. And that's basically how Otangelo also goes. Like he will, like when you explain something, he will often just ramble off many different things just to overwhelm you.
One of the
That's,
one of the
strategy.
funniest things that I've encountered in this is Nephilim Free, who had me on one of his shows and then endlessly showed me animations of how cells work, animations that show machines, which are animations, which is an interpretation of what happens in the cell, and he thinks that those aren't animations. He thinks those are actually footage taken within a cell with a high-powered microscope, showing the actual machines at work in a cell. Literally.
That's
so
really
sad.
like as stupid as Nephilim 3 is. I have to hear that from his mouth. I refuse to believe he believes that. Like,
It is worse, Nestle, because he kicked me because I pointed out that at the start of the video it says this is an animation of how we interpret the workings within a cell. It said that in the video. And he still said, no, that is an actual representation of the workings within a cell. Oh, okay.
No.
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 Oh.
No.
No. Okay. So, shall we continue?
Yeah.
Okay.
Complex problem on steroids. That's why even Dawkins will just speculate on the beginning, the origin of life. But then when you look at how life functions here, and you're trying to reverse engineer things, interesting word, reverse engineer.
He just says, like, I don't know how life started, but once you get replicators, it's off to the races.
How is it put together by randomness? I think
it's not randomness.
Ultimately it's futile to try and figure that out because it doesn't appear to be put together by randomness. Now, by the way, before we go into the fossil record, last thing. Can you continue to look for a natural cause for life? Yeah, you can continue to look for it if you want to. But when does a question become closed? At what point do you finally say, look, we've been looking long enough. When are we going to finally say information doesn't appear to have any natural cause? Natural forces, all the natural forces we know just create repetitive things over and over again.
We've been doing experiments for maybe 70 years. That is nowhere near long enough. Come on.
Can I just point out the irony again? Because this is one of the things why Otangelo hates me. Because Otangelo will always bring up abiogenesis. That is his shtick. You can't explain how the first cell got here or how DNA evolved or whatever.
Right.
And at some point I asked him, so what is your explanation? And his explanation was, well, God created it. And I said, okay, but that's not an explanation. That's the claim. Now explain to me how God created. Did he have source materials? Where did the source materials come from? And his answer literally was, I do not have to explain this. Frank Turek is exactly the same. He doesn't have to explain how God did anything because we can't know what God did. So that's his cop-out. Well, if you can't come up with an explanation, then don't criticize other people who are looking for an explanation and aren't there yet, but do have a lot of the major points already covered in how we got to where we are right now. And
absolutely.
It's so bad faith. Like it's not like when they are asking for an explanation for the origin of life. They aren't asking for an explanation. They just want to hear, we don't have an explanation. That's what they want to hear.
Yes.
No explanation.
And that is also why they always will go from evolution to abiogenesis, because they know that's the gotcha point. That's where we don't have a 100% certain explanation. We might not even get a 100% explanation even with every study, because there are several ways. There are several ways. I think there are 12 working hypotheses on how life could have arisen from non-life, all of which could have happened at the same time. We can't go back in
there
time.
are dozens and
Yes, we can't
there
go
are
back in.
dozens and dozens of different chemical pathways by which you can synthesize organic molecules.
Yes.
So.
But we can't go back in time and look
at to a point when
at which ones or which one was the one that resulted in life as we see it today. And maybe there are multiple. We don't know. And we might not know ever. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a good explanation of how it could happen. A working explanation.
In the side chat, Icarus says that Otangelo has said gravity does not work on gases.
Yeah, he has said that.
And also,
that's kind of really amazing, honestly.
Amazing. And also,
somebody tell Boyle.
Well,
also Bree says that Bree asks you, Peter, that does he really think the Kinesin animations are real?
I guess it's referring to Nephilim.
Yeah, I think so. I think Bree asks Peter whether Nephilim 3 really believes the Kinesin and animations are real, and I think yes. I think Peter says he does.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
And after he kicked me from that particular stream, he spent an entire year messaging me on Skype trying to get me back for another conversation, which I didn't know because I don't use Skype. And
he did that to me too.
And so
I opened it once by accident and I saw like how many messages there were.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing happened to me. Every single time he went live, he shot me a message. I'm going live tomorrow at such and such time. You can come on. I will shoot you the link. I already told him.
Just to be sure, was this an automated message or was
No.
A slightly different message every time?
It was
him actually sending the message.
Yes, it was, and it was different messages every single time, so it wasn't an automated thing.
He'd be like, we're going to talk about such and such thing. Yeah.
Oh my God! Talk about dedication.
Well,
it's like, my dude. No means no.
I told him when he kicked me, because the reason he kicked me wasn't actually because I criticized him. The reason he kicked me because I was, and now everyone's going to cringe, I was in a hangout with him and G-Man. And G-Man asked me a question. And Nephilim kept interrupting me answering the question. So I got annoyed and I said, listen, G-Man just asked me a question. I want to give him an answer. So please let me answer, and then you can butt in after that. And that's where I crossed the line because, he's God on his stream. And he will kick you, and if he can't kick you, he will just run away. Which he has done on several occasions when he had a debate set up on another channel.
I remember a very long time ago, like several years, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I actually was in a chat room with also with Nephilim 3 and G-Man, and like Nephilim 3 claimed that they discovered an owl from the Cretaceous. And I asked him like, I'm not familiar. Like I think owls are more exclusively Cenozoic. So I asked him for the source. He did not give me a source. He just says, look it up yourself. And so I looked it up myself, and it turns out it was when they discovered Alvarsaurus, they misinterpreted as an owl, but then more than a decade ago, it was found that, it's a non-avian dinosaur. So, and that was like more than a decade ago discovered. So he's, again, outdated once again. So,
What I took from the whole experience is that it is pretty sobering when you're in a hangout with 2 other people, and G-Man is the most reasonable. then you know that's a place you don't want to go again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, you ready?
Yep. We'll continue.
All right.
intelligence introduced somewhere, somehow, in this process?
When every knee will bow.
Huh?
When every knee will bow.
When every knee will bow, maybe. That's it. I don't know. But based on the information we have now, the best explanation is there was intelligence put in it at some point.
No.
Can I
that
underscore
wasn't.
something
Please.
that you implied here, and this is something that Stephen Meyer makes as a very, very strong point. The task
Also an
here
idiot.
isn't just looking around a little bit longer to see if we can find the right stuff. It has to do with the nature of the enterprise itself. Biochemical predestination is dead in the water because it can't produce information. They know that. So there's only a couple of avenues
We talked
that
about
the
this nonsense
materialist
last
can
time.
go that he has at disposal to explain information, and it turns out that the nature of information itself cannot be explained by those kinds of things. And so you run into a dead end because not because
Define information
I haven't
for me,
yet
please.
found
Right.
the little piece of
What
information
are you talking
to
about?
explain
Like,
it.
I
It's
know
because of
some-
the kinds of things that you're trying to bring together.
So could we say,
Better
Greg,
talk
in your
for a moment.
opinion, that this is a category mistake?
Yes.
That it's a
Yeah, the
it's
biologists
not
are
the
making
God
the
of the gaps
category
argument
mistake.
anymore either, because
Right.
nature itself can't explain immaterial realities known as
Exactly.
information. Okay.
You're trying to find a materialistic
I have a question for the. I have a
Okay.
question for the panel.
It's-
What are immaterial realities, and how do we investigate those?
I do not know. They're like arrayifying this term information, but the
Yeah, it's
problem
almost
is
like they think it's
it-
magic. Like
yeah, it
information is
doesn't-
magic.
it doesn't correspond to anything. Information doesn't mean anything in this context. It almost never does in creationist
Yeah.
circles. When they talk about information, it's just a buzzword. It's like, critical race theory. Like, you ask them point blank, what do you mean? Tell me what you mean so we can talk about it.
Mhm.
And they can't give you a definition, or they give you a definition that is ridiculous, or like that applies to everything. They're so bad at this. When they talk about the information in the genome, explain what that means. Point to a sequence of nucleotides that has information. Point to that. Can you tell me the difference in amount of information in two sequences without knowing what those sequences code for? They can't do it. They don't know. Is there more information in a longer sequence versus a shorter sequence? Or, in a certain number of genes? What does it mean? How can we quantify it? They will never give you that. They never will. Because if they do, then you can potentially refute them.
Mhm.
If they say a gene is information, and you say, okay, well, we just witnessed a gene duplication event that we had no hand in, that's a doubling of information, right? And they go, no. The information hasn't changed.
It must be new information.
Right. Okay, well, what if a mutation is introduced which causes this protein to fold differently and have a new function? No. That's not information either. Okay.
I got a
What
better
about if you
question,
have
Jackson. I got a better question. Let's suppose you have a gene, and due to replication, that gene gets turned off. It's still there.
Okay.
It's still there. Is that still the same amount of information? Or do we now have a loss of information? Because everything is still there, but the gene is turned off.
I feel like they call it a loss just because they're saying there's less happening now.
There's less happening, but
Just
the
on that.
information
But at
is
the same
still
time, though,
the information is still there.
but
It's turned off,
well, yes,
but
but
it's still there.
To your point, though, what if you changed the expression to make it more? If you made the expression greater, so instead of making one, protein per hour, it makes 2 per hour now. Is that
But then
new
you lost
information?
the function for 1 protein per hour.
It makes more information now, or more product, right? So
Yeah.
clearly it's increased information. No. It's the same thing. It's like if you say we have a de novo gene, this is a region of the genome that formerly coded for nothing, and
Yeah,
we
but
can demonstrate it coded for nothing originally,
My-
and now it does code for something.
My-
They
my-
will still say it's not new information.
But the thing is that if a gene gets turned off, it's a loss of information.
Yeah.
If a gene gets duplicated, then it's not a gain of information because it's the same gene
Exactly.
duplicated. So they count the gene at one point, but they don't count it at another point. So how do you define your amount of information if you don't have a consistent standard of the amount of information? Because all you need to do every single time is adapt your standard of what is an amount of information on how it suits you, and that is something that doesn't work. You need to have one consistent standard.
It gets even worse because if you follow the logic, you can say that if you have a mutation that turns protein A into protein B, that's a loss of information. But if you have the reverse, have a mutation from protein B back into A, that's also a loss of information.
It reminds me on when I was, I think, about 10 years old, I asked my neighbor who had a gas station how it could be that gas was more expensive, and he explained it thus. So if the price of crude oil goes up, then we have to make gas more expensive in order to compensate for the fact that we have to buy crude oil at a higher price. If, however, the price of crude oil goes down, then we have to up the price of the gasoline because now we lost money on crude oil that we had already bought, so we have to compensate for our loss, and that's why we have to increase the price of gasoline. This is literally what young earth creationists are doing with information. It doesn't work, but it's their explanation.
Yeah. It's whatever explanation you give, they will have a response as to why it doesn't work, such that unless like you're born with an extra whole genome, I don't think anything could possibly meet their criteria. They're non-existent criteria. There's nothing. There's no way to achieve new information or more information or whatever simply because they just won't let you. So. And that's dishonesty. That's not science. That's just apologist dishonesty.
Wait, are you saying that apologists can be dishonest? Say it isn't so.
Oh my goodness. Maybe.
Say it isn't
Who knows?
so.
I don't know.
Ain't it so?
Yeah, so earlier someone mentioned that Otangelo has said that gravity doesn't work on gases. The funniest thing, and he still has it on his blog. When you go on his blog and you go searching for Abiogenesis, he has a link to a magazine article that has the title, Were Adam and Eve, is the story of Adam and Eve true? Something like that. If you read that article, it then links you to a scientific paper that explains how organic materials came up to be living materials, self-replicating materials, basically an explanation for abiogenesis, and that was in a particular sort of clay, and that's where they made up the jokingly title, Is the Adam and Eve Story Correct? Because Adam supposedly was formed from dirt, and now we have an explanation in abiogenesis that it could have happened in clay. He still has that link up, even after I pointed out, well, your link points to this paper, and here's what this paper says. It says that abiogenesis is plausible. It really doesn't say what you think it says. And if you ever encounter Otangelo, I would encourage you to go to the links that he will provide to his blog, because literally every single link he has on there will refute his own point. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
I did it several times. It worked every single time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Playing more?
Alrighty.
continue.
Yep, let's move on.
Explanation for the existence of immaterial stuff, information, which your philosophy, first of all, can't explain how you get something immaterial
Define it.
from something material, but it
Define
also,
it.
your philosophy denies the existence of immaterial things to begin with.
That's right.
I deny that you have a definition of
it's
information.
just in principle not capable of solving this problem.
But then, just like that, the atheist could be right. That's what he's famous for saying.
Every time they say
Was that
information, I
Tom?
hear
No,
gobbledygook.
I think you're right on.
Yeah.
It's a different category. It's like trying to find a natural cause for all of nature. Trying to
You
find a
guys are
natural cause for
philosophers
information
talking
when we know
about-
information's
Or
immaterial.
discount philosophers talking
Last
about biology.
thing, fossil record.
Talk about a category
Again,
error.
we interpret the data via philosophy. Let's go back to Stephen Jay Gould, perhaps one of the more famous evolutionists who died
Quote
about 10
mine,
years ago. He
incoming.
taught at Harvard. He said this: modern multicellular animals make their first uncontested appearance in the fossil record some 570 million years ago, and with a bang,
Jesus
not a
Christ.
protracted crescendo. This Cambrian explosion marks the advent, at least into direct evidence, of virtually all the major groups of modern animals, and all within the minuscule span, geologically speaking, of a few million years. In other
Can I
words,
pause?
there
Pause
there
for a
are
moment.
fewer.
Just,
I knew this was coming.
I want to cry. I want to cry because, like, I've done so many videos debunking this one
Yes.
argument. For one thing, not only have we've done Nestlik, we've done like 6 different videos on this channel, for instance, just alone.
Yep.
Mhm.
Debunking this argument. Let's see. I also
It
did
ca-
a video on Vice Rhino's channel where I explained why this argument is bad.
It also
And
came up in
then
the
I
in the
wrote a-
series. It also came up in the series you did with Dapper, where you went over the entirety of time.
Right.
Also,
Yes. Yeah. I was counting that on this channel also.
Yeah.
But then I also co-authored a script on Professor Dave's channel, the Stephen Meyer one, where we talked about this and debunked it. I've written or been a part of writing like 8 different scripts on this, and I'm so tired of having to refute this one argument. You know, it's like, okay. The long and short of it is, this Gould quote came from like the late 80s, and that is simply not the case anymore. No paleontologist.
A bit outdated.
Yeah,
Just a tiny bit.
A smidgen.
Tiny bit.
Just a smidgen outdated. But yeah, no, this quote is way outdated.
Well, I have to Jackson, I have to interrupt, because as we now know that most of their arguments come from a book that was published in 1967, having a quote from the 80s is actually pretty new.
You know what? That's fair. That is very fair.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But like the first multicellular organisms, the oldest 2 I can think of are like Bangiomorpha and Raphitasmia, which are 2 red algae from like 1.2 billion years ago. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you get macroscopic multicellular organisms in the early Ediacaran, so 635 million years ago. But we have evidence.
It's like Lantia is like a putative Nadarian, I think.
Yeah, Lantianella.
Even
yeah.
Yeah.
There are sponge steranes in the Cryogenian from like 690 million years ago, something like that. So this idea that, you know, animals they just poofed into existence and boom, there they are. No, that's simply not true. It's so wrong. And as Hive Science points out, a 55 million year long explosion, right? Because there's a paper by Zaravlev and Wood where they talk about the 2 phases of the Cambrian explosion. There's a phase that lasts from about 550 to like 520 million years ago, and then another Cambrian explosion from 520 to 480 million years ago. So there's one from before the Cambrian started to like about, you know, halfway through, somewhere in there. Well, no, not quite halfway through. So the first 20 million years or so. And then there's another Cambrian explosion on the second part of the Cambrian period. So it's not just one explosion. And then the fun part about the second Cambrian explosion is it actually rides seamlessly into the Ordovician explosion. So there's an extinction event in like 520 million years ago called the Sinsk extinction. So you have radiation right before the Cambrian starts, leading into the Cambrian. Then you have an extinction, wipes out a bunch of stuff. Then you have a new radiation, and that goes into the Ordovician. Then at the end of the Ordovician, you have another extinction event. Then you have another radiation in the Silurian, which, again, there's an extinction event. And it's the cyclic, the cyclic series, right? Over and over and over. We see extinction, radiation, extinction, radiation. Why? Because organisms are refilling the niches that were left by the previous organisms, which are now extinct.
And if I may do some shameless self-promotion,
go ahead.
There's actually one of a few videos that I have on my own channel is a time lapse on the Cambrian explosion, where I made like a crude animation of like starting like 1,000 million years ago and ending into the end Ordovician, and seeing like, oh, where do the animals appear and where and when exactly? And you see like, oh, there's like a pretty gradual change actually. Most of the part, yeah.
Yep.
Because like I think you know what I'm talking about. Like, there's like this clip where you have like Jonathan Wells saying like, oh, for millions of years you have nothing, only single cell, and then bam, everything was there. That's how they, yeah, that's how they put it. Yeah,
it's so wrong. It's so wrong, and they don't even care. They just don't care at this point. You can't convince me that they don't know that the data exists. They just don't care.
I have a different opinion. I think they do care, because this is the closest that they get in where it actually looks like there was a creator that just created everything at one particular point in time. It's the closest you get to the creation myth, which is why they will keep misinterpreting it, because deep down it kind of proves their point. Maybe if you misinterpret it good enough, I think that's the reason.
It's also strange to realize that, like, on one hand they will say that the geologic column is just fake or not non-existent, and then at the same time they will say that the Cambrian explosion is evolution. But even the only way we know of the Cambrian explosion is the geologic column.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's well.
That's what I said. That's what I said earlier. They keep digging holes for themselves to fall into, and not just more, but bigger ones too. If your explanation doesn't work, then you should at some point just give it up. If you can't make the puzzle pieces fit, you can cram them in there, and yeah, that will work at times. You won't get the entire puzzle ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right. Let's keep going.
One last thing, wasn't Gould also a bit wrong in his description of the Cambrian explosion in his book Wonderful Life, right?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is due to the fact that they didn't have the technology we now do. Like
and the data,
they thought that they didn't have the data we have. They thought that like the what do you call them, the like Dickinsonia proreticulata, there we go, all those almost bilaterally symmetrical guys, and like in the Ediacaran, they thought those were just weird like protists or something, had nothing to do with animals.
Right.
We know now, actually, no, those were animals. They were like stem bilaterians. We know that now. There were Cnidarians in the Ediacaran, like Cautia. There were actual, bilaterians like Icaria and Cambriella and Eulingia. Yeah. So we know now that there were definite bilaterians, as well as stem bilaterians, and coelenterids and sponges. All these guys were around in the Ediacaran, at least. We know sponges go into the Cryogenian. But so yeah, they had been around for like 70 million years by the time the Cambrian explosion finally hits, you know. So yeah,
It is really significant to see that like at the end of the Ediacaran, you see the appearance of like a burrowing thing, like making tunnels and
Yes.
such, and basically you have like a worm world appearing at the end of the Ediacaran, and what they did is it basically destroyed the microbial mass and paved the way for the new ecology that became more standard in the later periods. Like do you know what defines the base of the Cambrian, Jackson? Like what fossil defines the base?
Tryptichnus pedum, which is probably a
Yeah.
preapulid.
Yeah, it's a worm burrow.
Yeah.
Today's fossil. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so you can't fault Gould for having the data that he had at the time, but you can fault Frank Turek for being like Gould's 1987 quote is the best we got now. So, you know. Oh well, alrighty. Let's move on.
Moving on. Yeah.
Phyla now than there were at the Cambrian explosion. Exactly opposite to what you think with regard to Darwinism. Here is a clip from
What?
Darwin's Dilemma, which is a phenomenal
Wait, hold on.
DVD.
Peter, can you
Hold
go
on.
back?
He said to them more phylum in the past. Let's replay. Just
Can you replay by like 20 seconds or so? I want to hear that quote. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Speaking of a few million years, in other words, there are fewer phyla now than there were at the Cambrian explosion.
Oh, that's so wrong.
Exactly opposite to what you think with regard to
Oh,
Darwinism.
that's so
Here
wrong.
Is a clip from
No.
Darwin's Dilemma.
He did
which
not
is a
just say
phenomenal
that.
DVD.
Peter, pause it. He did not just say that. What the frick? Where did he even get that idea?
Hold on. Actually, that is actually one of Gould's ideas. I believe, because he thought that the pattern of diversity
Oh, the
was like
upside down Christmas tree.
Yeah, like a reverse Christmas tree. I think. Yeah.
Oh. Well, okay, but Gould. Yeah, okay. Jesus Christ. The thing. I'm trying to remember. But yeah, Gould had this idea that like the different critters were all like separate phyla. So like Anomalocaris was its own phylum, and Opabinia was a separate phylum, and Nectocaris was a separate phylum, and Hallucigenia and Wawaxia. But of course, we know now that's not true. These guys are like stem members of existing phylum. So like Anomalocaris and Opabinia are stem arthropods. They're not separate phyla because phylum refers only to living organisms, right? Stem and crown members of phyla. So the crown members of a phylum are the members is the common ancestor and all the descendants, including all the ones that currently exist. Right? It is the common ancestor of all the members who currently exist. That's the crown. Stem is everything that is more basally derived than that. And so to say there were more phyla back then than there are today is just so wrong. There are like 15 or 16 phyla in the Cambrian, crown phyla. Actually, no, that's not even true. There are representatives, either stem or crown, of 15 to 16 phyla in the Cambrian. But today there are like 30, it's like 30, 32, something like that. It's around 30 normally. Because at least nine of the phyla don't have fossil records at all. And of the ones who do, not all of them have crown members in the Cambrian. Some are just stem, like velvet worms, the onychophorans. There are no crown velvet worms in the Cambrian. There are only stem velvet worms. Just, oh, he's so dumb. He's so dumb.
I believe like one of Gould's ideas was like at the Cambrian explosion you have like this a wide range of different forms, and then after extinction you have like a limited range of forms. Like like normally you would think that the diversity slowly increases, but the Gould was like, no, at the beginning you have more variation, and then over time you have less variation. But I think he's wrong on that.
Oh, he's
also,
definitely wrong on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good gravy. All right, continuing.
Okay.
If you guys don't have it, I think we may have some back at the house. We'll bring them in. Take a look at this clip. This explains the Cambrian explosion very quickly.
But late in the Precambrian, they disappeared from the Earth. Then, long after their extinction, everything changed in a geological instant.
What do you mean long after? And what do you mean geological instant?
In a
Also,
spectacular burst of creativity.
Okay, can you stop for a moment?
The basic
Like at the beginning, it says after the extinction in the late Cambrian. Like, okay, what did we skip? What did we skip?
Well,
Right?
so he said long after their extinction, which is like 5 million years, and then the 50 million year Cambrian explosion is the geological instant. Like,
It's just a blink of an eye,
I think
Jackson.
there's a little bit of. I think there's a bit of deck stacking going on here, Peter. I can't put my finger on it, but I think
Yeah.
they're deck stacking just a little bit. All right. Anyway.
Okay.
blueprints for most of the animal kingdom exploded into being. And for the first time, biologically complex structures like compound eyes, spinal cords, articulated limbs, and skeletons
Compound eyes
appeared
actually
on
suck.
Earth.
Spinal cords
To understand
are
the
just
speed of the
tubes.
Cambrian explosion, imagine
Actually,
the
hold on,
history
pause
of
for a second.
life.
Just to put in perspective, like how much compound eyes suck as a method for seeing. I hear myself echoing again. So compound eyes are like a little tube that where you see just a little bit at the end, right? So compound eyes are made of these little tubes called ommatidia, and each one sees just a tiny bit. And the arthropod brain has to basically take all the light, the neuron information and compose that into a picture. And that's what the arthropod sees. For an arthropod to have compound eyes that see as well as our camera eyes, they would have to have millions of ommatidia. Do you guys want to take a guess as to what the greatest number of ommatidia is in an arthropod?
Much less.
30,000 in dragonflies.
Mm-hmm.
They are terrible at seeing. I'm also going to refresh. Give me 1 sec.
Okay. Well, I can also say that the spinal cord isn't what it should be either. I suffer from severe back pains, so I could do with a better spinal cord than the one that I have right now. My
we
back.
have an arthropod apologist in the side chat who I don't think is wrong, but I don't think that's because the animal in question has compound eyes. So, I'm sorry.
I mean, maybe they use less energy. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The spinal cord itself is just a tube. It's just a little tube for nerves. Like that's not super
Jackson,
complex.
Vertebrate eyes are overrated.
Is that right? What else was there? Like, we know that there were bilaterians in the Ediacaran. They were little wormy guys, and if you look at a lot of like the basal members, like the stem members of like these phyla, a lot of them are little wormy guys. I'm echoing again. It's okay. We're almost to the end. Like hallucigenia, is a little wormy dude. It's the stem onychophoran. Opabinia and Anomalocaris are like, they have these little kind of segmented wormy bodies, but with little limbs coming off of them, or well, not limbs, but these little like rays. I don't know what you would call them exactly. What else is there? Hycoichthyes is like kind of a little wormy fish guy. These aren't super complex organisms.
It was fun that you mentioned there was actually a recent discovery of, I think, a lophophorate or something like that, like a relative of the
Like
well,
brachiopods.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like you have things like brachiopods who are like today they are sessile. They just attached to the floor of the ocean.
Right.
But then their relatives were more worm-like, and you have now here a worm, an armored worm. It's basically a relative of the brachiopods there.
Mm.
That was a recent discovery. It's called a tomotiid.
Yeah, I've heard of those guys. Those are those are considered members of the stem lophophorates. They track back to like the early Cambrian. There are also possible stem lophophorates in the Ediacaran. Fun fact.
Right.
Like Namacalathus.
Yes. That
So,
one, yeah.
So yeah, like
that maybe even a more basal thing,
Yeah.
like also related to the mollusks, right? Also.
Yeah, it could be just like a stem spiralian in something like that, like total group spiralia. That's possible, certainly. Yeah, it's the fact is, and the same is true of like Cambriella. It could be a stem mollusk or it might be a stem spiralian. The point of the matter is, we have very basally derived organisms that appear before the crown groups, and that's what evolution expects and predicts, and we have them. Now we can find more, and I hope we do. But like, we already have what we expect, so whatever. Anyway, let's continue onward.
Okay.
Compressed into a single day.
If we imagine the whole history of life on Earth taking place
Womp
in one
womp.
24-hour period.
Oh, that's the clip I was
current,
referring to.
Standard
Yeah,
estimates
just a
for
minute
the
ago.
origin of life put it
Yeah.
at about 3.8 billion years ago. Let's say 4 billion. So
Who
if we start
cares?
the
It's an
clock
analogy.
then, our
Do not
24-hour
care.
Clock. 6 hours, nothing but these simple single-celled organisms appear. The same sort that we saw in the beginning. 12 hours, same thing. 18 hours, same thing. 3/4 of the day has passed, and all we have are these simple single-celled organisms. Then at about the 21st hour, in the space of about 2 minutes, boom, most of the major animal forms appear in the form that they currently have in the present.
Nope, that's
And
a
many of
lie.
them persist
That
in the
is
present,
just a
and we have
lie.
them with us
That's
today.
all that is.
Less than 2 minutes out of a 24-hour period. That's how sudden the Cambrian explosion was.
I
You know
love
what,
that
let's pause it there.
illustration because I
Let's
think
pause it there.
brings it right.
Because we're at the end of the time. Yeah, so for one thing, that was just a flat lie. Like I can't say he was misinterpreting the evidence or anything. No, it was just a lie. He just lied. As we pointed out earlier,
Sorry, my dog just fell off the couch. So that was the
there were multi-celled organisms. So after 8 hours, right? Or well, no, I get a little bit more than that. But like, what's a third of 3.8?
Yeah.
I don't know.
3.8.
That's so one.
I never.
1 point, I don't know. Whatever. So 1.1. Frick, I don't even
Jackson
know.
doing mathematics in that.
I'm trying to figure out how. That doesn't seem right. Whatever. Anyway, okay. So somewhere around the 8-hour mark on his 24-hour day, we already had multicellular organisms. We know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's Jackson.
It's just wrong.
Jackson. It's 1.266666 recurring.
Actually, okay. If we assume it's 4 hours. Or sorry, that it's 4 billion. If we go up to 4 billion, so half of that is 2 billion. So 12. So okay, so more like after. Okay, so after about 12 hours, if we bump it up to 4 billion, so after 12 hours, or so, then you would have multicellular organisms showing up. Like you have multicellular organisms almost a
9.
billion years before the first the Cambrian explosion. So the Cambrian explosion happened about 542 million years ago. You have multicellular organisms about 1.2 billion years ago. So 700 million years precede, the Cambrian explosion in terms of having complex multicellular organisms. So it's like, it's just a lie. There's nothing else I can say about that.
Yeah.
And also not modern forms. There were no elephants, no bunny rabbits in the Cambrian. There were no insects or lobsters, or starfish.
Or humans.
Again,
or octopus.
Would they say if you look at the chordates, just the chordates, would they say that humans have the same form as the Cambrian chordates?
Right.
Would they really admit that?
I mean, yeah, Nestle. If you look at Pacaya, it looks just like us. What are you talking about? It looks exactly the same as us. No different. No notes.
It's so weird for the guys who will harp on about created kinds. The dog kind is totally different from the cat kind, and at the same time they will say, "Oh yeah, chordates in the Cambrian. They are all modern forms. Yeah, yep." It's so weird.
Yeah, this is so dumb. Okay, well, that's enough stupid for today. It's time for us to call it. So, do you guys have anything you want to add or plug before we hop off?
It's pretty much the same as we had when we read the book in the previous series. There's not a lot of new stuff coming up, and what does come up is my same grievances with people like this is they will never get to any science up to date. They will always refer back to science that is decades old, as if that somehow is better, because they will even use quotes that we now know are wrong. It's all just dishonesty. And why? If what you claim to have is the ultimate truth, then why do you have to lie so much in order to prove that you're right?
Yeah,
that's my question.
And I would say for anyone watching, of course we couldn't go into great detail on the Cambrian explosion. So if you want to know more details, Jackson Reed has 2 videos, actually more videos, of course, but two in particular: Cambrian explosion part 1 and part 2. That gives more details. And also, as Jackson mentioned earlier, we also helped with the script for David. David Explains for his video debunking Stephen Meyer.
Yeah, go that script was so cathartic to write, because a lot of our Cambrian videos kind of sort of all cover different little aspects of the Cambrian, but none of them cover it as one whole thing. And with Dave's video, we just cover the whole thing start to finish and kick all of Meyer's arguments at once.
Yeah.
So
no mammals in the Mesozoic. No mammals in the Mesozoic.
That was one of the other. Yeah, if you guys don't know, please watch Professor Dave's video on Stephen Meyer, because Meyer says the first mammals appear in the Eocene, which was started 56 million years ago, which is almost 100 million years after the first mammals show up in the fossil record. So,
just go to show that he is not a paleontologist.
No,
not by a long shot.
No, he's not. The funny thing was, I'm sorry, I'm running on here. I had a conversation with Jonathan McClatchy, who's another apologist, on Twitter, and I pointed out, I think it was while I was writing that script or whatever, drafting it, the first draft. I was like, man, can't believe Meyer said the first mammals appear in the Eocene. And McClatchy's like, oh, he didn't really say that. What are you talking about? So I, sent him the video link to the point in the video when he said this. And McClatchy was like, oh, I see. What he meant to say was the first crown mammals appeared in the Eocene. To which I responded,
it's also false.
Right. Like, first of all, that's not what he said. Why are you reinterpreting what he said? Second of all, that's still wrong.
But third would be, how do you know what he meant to say? Can you read minds?
He meant placental mammals then.
And that would still be wrong. It's like, it's like, my guy, yes, would it be nice if he had said this instead of this? Sure, but that's not what he said. So, he was still wrong. Whichever way you tried to slice it, he's still wrong. So, anyway, all right, well, on that note, I guess we're going to terminate the stream. So, Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Peter, for hosting and co-hosting as always. Thank you, Nestlig, for coming. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody in the live chat, for watching. Really appreciate it, guys. And on that note, we are out. So see you all next time.
Bye, everyone.